Alright, so for this tutorial we're going to work on layers. We're going to manipulate them, we're going to merge them, we're going to work with numerous layers and hopefully get to understand it a bit more and the process. So File New, and we're going to create a photo and we're going to rename this sandwich. So as you have your document open, make sure your file save as your area, save it onto a USB if you have one, probably save it in iterations as you go through. So sandwich 1, sandwich 2. It should be a little bit easier to manage with all the layers that we're going to do, but it's just in case you make any major mistakes. So I'm not going to save this at the moment. So first of all, you'll need either access to sandwich images. So think of your perfect sandwich. What would you have in it? So as you can see, I've got some bread, cheese, chicken. I've got quite a lot of ingredients. When you do search for the images, if you're going to use Google, try and use top-down slice of bread, top-down chicken, and see where you get from there. Alternatively, if you can have access to the Dropbox, I'm going to put all my images on there so you can choose from a range. I'm not going to use all of them. So as you can see, I have Google searched a top-down image of a plate, and I'm just going to copy the image and Control V and place it in Photoshop. Obviously there's edit and paste as well there. So as you automatically paste a image into Photoshop, it's going to create it in a new layer. But we already have the background layer, which is the white one that you can see. So what I'm going to do is just delete that layer. And as you see, it'll just give you a checked background. So I'm just going to double click on layer 1 and rename this to plate. So when we're on the image, if you press Ctrl T, and that's going to take you into the transformation. Now, before you grab one of the corners, press Shift and it will keep the image in perfect shape. Now, if you don't hold Shift, you could end up distorting the plate quite a lot. Obviously, don't accept the settings. So cancel transformation and then Ctrl T again if you do mess up. And then you can hold Shift and drag it out. That should do nicely. I'm going to accept those settings. So we have our plate background. So now we're going to insert the other objects. So make sure at this point you do have them all in your area, all those images for the sandwich. Because I'm going to show you a new way how to place images into Photoshop. So it's exactly that, using the place command. So File, Place, and then you select your image, and then you place it in Photoshop. As you can see, there's a difference. It already places it into Photoshop, but it places it as a smart object. Now what this means, because our images were already JPEGs, that when you zoom in you can actually see the pixels, but when you place it as a smart object you can transform it and distort it and warp it as much as you like, and all the pixels are going to stay perfectly clear like a vector image. So I'm just going to hold Shift and rescale it or transform it into the size that I think roughly is going to do, and I'm going to accept those settings. So before, the thing is about placing a smart object in is it will not let you edit this object. As you can see by the change of the cursor, it's a small circle with a cross through. So in order to make any edits to this image, I'm just going to select the magic eraser tool from the toolbar options down the side, and I want to delete this white background. Now the magic eraser tool is a fantastic tool, but it only works on a one color. So if it's a block color, it's fantastic to use. So when I click this, you can see the smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Edit contents will no longer be available. Rasterize the smart object. Basically yes or no. So OK or cancel. So I'm just going to press OK, and that's going to effectively turn it into a bitmap image. It's going to let me edit it. It's going to let me make changes to it. And then I'm going to select the white background. And as you can see, it all disappears quite nicely. Now, if I zoom in by pressing Alt and then the scroll wheel on the mouse, you can see that this is not exactly one colour. So when I take out the grey bit, it's going to leave that little colour around the edge. So you can just keep clicking until you think it's gone, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, if you do click on your bread, it takes out that one colour that it thinks it's selected. So you can press Ctrl Z and I'll undo that. So I'm just going to zoom back out. And there we go. So now we have a bread. Automatically, when you place an object in, it's going to create it in a new layer. So if we delete the bread, you can see you've already got your plate. So we are going to make a sandwich in order. So next I'll probably place some lettuce. And you can see the transformation has gone a bit too big. So I'm going to hold Shift and take that down a bit. Now if you wanted to rotate it, you just move your mouse over or away from the box, and you can see your cursor is slightly curved, so you can move it around. And to move it, you just get the center like before. So we're going to accept that. Magic Eraser tool. I'm just going to accept the rasterization and then delete. As you can see, there's quite a lot of grey and bits and pieces. I'm just going to go through. Now alternatively to using the Magic Eraser, you can use the select tool. So you can use the tools that you've been using before, so quick selection, magic wand, and go around the lettuce. Depends what you want to try. But for now, I'm just going to stick with this because it's more about the layers. Okay. Probably still left a few bits in there, but you get the point. Right. So, I have lettuce. Maybe I want some more lettuce. It looks a bit sparse. Too much bread and not enough lettuce. So, I'm going to go to the Select and Move tool here. And you can see you can move the lettuce around. Now, if you wanted to rotate it a bit more, Control T. And there we go. And accept the settings. So, as you can see, on your layers, you now have plate, bread, and lettuce. If it doesn't say plate, bread, and lettuce, then just double click and rename. So for lettuce, I don't think there's enough lettuce there. So I'm going to right click over the word lettuce and I'm going to duplicate the layer. And automatically it puts the name and then it states the fact that it's a copy. Now if you wanted to change that, you can. But I'm just going to keep that as lettuce copy. So when I'm on the Select and Move tool, you can see that I'm not moving the original one, but I am moving the lettuce copy. If I wanted to remove the original one, I just select it and you can see it puts a lighter grey box around that, and then you can grab the other lettuce. So I want to be on the lettuce copy and I want to move it around, so I'm going to transform and just flip it around. Maybe like so. I think it would have been better with a big leaf of lettuce, but that's fine. So okay. Now, because these two are near enough the same, and I don't think I'm going to be changing the positions of the lettuce or each lettuce, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Control and select the other lettuce. Now, as you can see, it selects them both. If you make a mistake, just click anywhere and try again. Control, There we go. So when you press right click on the mouse, you can see it says merge layers. So what I'm going to do is select merge layers. And what that does is it puts those two layers and combines them together. So now I have one layer instead of two. So I have one layer of lettuce instead of them being separate. Now the only thing is, if I wanted to move the one piece, I couldn't now. It's a whole new layer altogether. So it's a whole new piece of lettuce. So when I press Ctrl T, you can see I'm moving the whole thing and not the two separate ones. But I'm just going to take that name out of there and just have it as lettuce. So file, place, and what we're going to put lettuce. I'm going to do some chicken. This one's got a bit of text in. So same as before, transform to the size you want and accept. We can use a quick selection tool for this one. And then select an inverse. And then I'm going to use the magic eraser. And it's going to tell me I need to rasterize it because I completely forgot. And I'm just going to delete around. As you can see, it's left one or two spots. So you can just use the eraser tool and go around. Like so. Now, it does have a bit of text and a bit of white in there. So make sure you select and deselect to get off your marching ants around there. And erase the tool. I'm just going to carefully, just quickly tidy this up. So don't forget you have access to all your other tools as well. So the spot healing brush. Just to get rid of a bit of that text that was there before. Like so. As you can see, there's a bit of white in here. So if we zoom in, you can see that the image is not so great now, because the more you zoom in, you're going to get to see these little pixels. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit more. I'm just going to use the magic eraser. See if we can get that white. There we go, that's quite good. And it's chicken slice and its own new layer. So now we can use the move tool and place it roughly where you want. And then we're going to go place some tomatoes in. I'm going to accept, magic eraser, rasterize, delete. That's quite nice. So one tomato is not going to do it. So if you hold down Alt or Option on the Mac and use your mouse and move it across, you can see instead of going right click, duplicate layer, you can do it with a shortcut on your keyboard. So hold down Alt and move them down. Alt and move it across. As you can see, I've got 4 tomatoes there and they are all separate. So if you think they're all a bit too small or too large, you can select the 4, press Ctrl T, hold Shift, and you can make them all bigger at the same time, so you keep them roughly the same size. So now I just want one. I need to accept the transformation, and then I can just move them around one by one. There we go. Doesn't look too perfect that way. So the same as before, if you didn't do this with your lettuce, if you hold down Control and select them all the tomatoes, and right click and merge layers. So then we just have 4 tomatoes all together. So now it's probably a bit too dry because we didn't put any butter on there. So we could put some mayonnaise. So roughly a mayonnaise looking colour. That should do. And we're going to use the paintbrush tool. So I already have mine set at 29 with the hardness up to 100. But before we do anything, we need to create a new layer, because when we paint in, we're going to automatically paint in the layer that we have selected. So in this case, the tomatoes. So we're just going to paint all over the tomatoes, which is not going to be fantastic in case you make a mistake. So what we need to do is select a new layer. So at the bottom of the layer tools here, if you hover over, you get create new layer. Just have to extend my Photoshop screen, so there we go. So as you can see here at the bottom, we have add new layer or create a new layer. So I'm just going to click that and it renames that layer 1. So before we do anything, I'm just going to double click it. I'm just going to call that mayo and press enter. So then we can start drawing on our new layer. And if we make any mistakes, we can delete the layer or even hide it. So these eyes on here is visibility. So if you deselect one, you're not going to see it anymore. So we can deselect our plate and you're just left with a plain looking sandwich. So back to the mayonnaise. So I'm just going to draw some squiggles like so. Now it looks quite flat, quite boring. So we're going to put some effects on it. So on the bottom of your layers, you can see an icon says FX. So we're just going to select that and we're going to click bevel and emboss. And automatically it brings up the layer styles. So if you didn't want bevel and emboss from here, you could deselect that and choose another style. So I've selected bevel and emboss, and the style is going to be in a bevel, and you can see it brings out the edges, so you can change the depth, the size to make it look a bit bumpy and uneven, and soften it a bit. It looks quite sharp at the moment. Just going to change the opacity as well. There we go. So that looks slightly better. Obviously you can have a bit more of a play around. I don't want to spend too much here. Obviously you have got different techniques. I think smooth one's best. And you have different styles of bevel. So you can bevel it from the outside, which looks quite revolting. You can have an emboss, pillow emboss, or stroke emboss. So for now I'm just going to keep with it in a bevel and select OK. It's not perfect. Hopefully yours will be a little bit better. So as you can see, it's created some effects within the same layer. You can also hide these effects. So if you click on the eyeball next to effects, you can see you'll be left with what you originally drew with your paintbrush. And to put them back on, you just click over there again. So you can end up with one layer having many different effects on. So you can go through and select them one by one. or you can just turn all the effects off and see what you've drawn originally. So then we have the mayo. Now I think I'm done. Obviously, besides some butter, which you can go and play around with. So I'm just going to file. You could file place another slice of bread, but obviously you'd have to match the one that was underneath. So instead, I'm going to duplicate the bread. So right click, duplicate layer, bread. Instead of bread, copy bread top slice. There we go. But it's put it above the bread, so you can't see it on the top. So we're going to hold the bread top slice and drag it all the way to the top until you see the highlighted line there. And we're going to drop it. So now your sandwich is in order. So if we take away the bread, so everything that's at the top is what is going to be visible first. So when we hide the bread, you can see you're left with most of the sandwich that you can see. You can see the lettuce, you can see a bit of the chicken. So then we're going to hide the mayo and the tomato and the chicken and the lettuce, and you're down to the bread. And you can see there's absolutely nothing on it. But we're working according to Photoshop, we are working on the top slice of the bread, which we can't see. So if I just draw, it's going to tell you. You could not use the brush tool because the target layer is hidden. So we need to put the visibility back on the bread. So I'm just going to draw some lines here. I don't want you to do this, or you can just to play around. So when I hide the bread top layer, you can't see any effects of the sandwich as a whole because I've deselected your lettuce, the chicken, tomato and mayo. But when I delete the top, or when I hide the visibility now to the top layer, you can see the drawing goes along with it. So I'm just going to delete that. So we've merged layers and put it into one. So now you can see the order in which you're working on. So everything that you do in the top layer is going to be visible to the whole image. So if you wanted to work on the other layers, if you press Alt and just select bread, for example, it's going to deselect all the other ones and just have bread selected. So if you wanted to make any effects to the bread, soften the edges a bit, rotate it, you could do that just by pressing Alt and hitting the visibility on one of them. Now, to get them back, you just press Alt and click on it again. But for example, if you were to click Alt and then click on the visibility of lettuce, when you press Alt, it won't work because it'll just work on the last ones that you did. So you'd have to go through them individually, put them all back on. But hopefully now you can see in what order the layers go just by using a sandwich. So if you wanted to make changes to your chicken, Alt to the chicken, and you can go in, you can tidy up all the edges, add different effects, same as the other bread. So I'm going to work on the bread. So I think it needs a little bit butter. So I'm just going to change the color and double click on your color swatch here. We could do it up here on the top right. That should do. And I want the paintbrush tool. Just going to mess around. That should do it. Right. Now what I've done is I've put it on that bread. So if I make any mistakes, I'm going to have to duplicate the top layer of bread and bring it down to the bottom or just above the plate. What you should have done is created a new layer for butter. So if I can edit and step backwards, going to take me through quite a bit. So I'm going to go select my bread and create new layer, and the new layer will go above your bread. So I'm just going to rename that to butter and draw over. Like so. It's not perfect, but as you can see at the top where your layer toolbar is, you have opacity, you have normal, you have all sorts of different extra icons as well. So with butter selected, I'm going to choose normal, drop down, and I'm just going to use saturation, and it'll change the saturation on what you've just done. Looks a little bit orange. Maybe turn down the opacity a little bit. There we go. That'll do for now. I mean, you're not going to see most of it anyway when you put the other slice of bread on top. But it was just to show you all the different tools and techniques that you can do. Now, obviously, if you wanted to select them all, so for example, if you're going to resize your whole sandwich, you've decided maybe the plate looks a little bit too big. Highlight them all apart from plate. So you've got them all selected apart from the plate, and you can press Ctrl T, hold your shift button, and you'll resize the entire sandwich. And I'm going to accept. And there we go. You have one sandwich created using layers. So, for example, if I was to drag the chicken slice to the top, just think of it as your sandwich. So your whole sandwich is underneath and your chicken is on the top. And that is exactly how you'd be working within your layers. So you take away the bread, mayo, tomato, chicken, lettuce, butter, bread. So just think, when you're playing around with layers and you may be getting a bit lost, always remember what's on top is what you'll see first. And there you have it, layers. So now, when you go through this again and try it yourself, add some cutlery in. Or even if you wanted a bigger challenge, what about an upright sandwich? So rather than a top-down view, when you're just looking at a sandwich, so you see the stacked ones, you can go about 5-6 layers of bread and meat and ham and cheese and everything, and a perfect ideal sandwich with the front way. But I'll let you have a go at that one. So maybe something like this, for example. So you can see a side view.